Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien, and we have a wonderful guest for you this evening, Phoebe Godfrey. She's done so many things here in the town of Windham and for the region, and I'm so pleased and honored to have her here today to talk about a number of things, but she has, from ideas to art and exploration, she's going to have an exhibit at the Carrie Quirk Gallery here on Main Street. But before we do that, I want to just give a little background on Phoebe, just in case you've missed out on all the things that she does. So, Phoebe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan and Dennis.
Great to have you here, Phoebe.
Yeah.
And, so one of the things, I first met Phoebe when she was working on creating Click, and that's that community licensed kitchen that we have now. And Phoebe helped create that. And just tell us a little bit about Click, and so people will understand it, and how you've actually Click has been instrumental in actually bringing businesses to town, helping agricultural community be more sustainable and have more access to business and ways to expand their opportunities. So tell us a little bit about that.
Great. Yeah, thanks for asking. So Click was an idea that came out of the Willimantic Food Co-op probably 15 years ago now, and everybody saw the need for a place for farmers to add value, reduce food waste, incubate businesses, support our local food entrepreneurs, and so the idea of a kitchen came, and we also thought, we should work with the soup kitchen and we should work with farmers and that. And I think it took about 12 years and many hours of effort to become a nonprofit, to try to find somewhere to house the idea, to get grants. And here we are, 15 years later, and I'm totally blown away at how well Click is doing in terms of a waiting list for entrepreneurs. Farmers are really benefiting from having a place to expand food processing, and Click's had a lot of money come in from our own state, from the federal government, from private foundations, and it always seemed like such a great idea if only we could get funding, and we have. Yes. I'm no longer directly involved. I still help with writing grants, but that's also important, right? That Tina, my wife, and I were the founders, and it's important to step away and let your nonprofit go to college and be like, all right, bye, see what happens. And I also wrote a book about it that was published by Routledge, which is a large academic publishing, probably the largest in the world, and it's called. What is it? Understanding Just Sustainabilities, a case study of a Connecticut shared use kitchen. And it's a sociological book, but that tells the story of creating the kitchen and really asks the readers to go on this journey with me and figure out what does it mean, right? What is the meaning of such a nonprofit, and can we say a nonprofit supports social justice? And if so, what does that mean? How do you measure it? Are you just today and unjust tomorrow? And so the book looks at successes and failures and gives people an idea, if they wanted to make a similar type nonprofit, that it would be a really great book to read if you wanted to get ideas. I've had my students read it to understand how to create a nonprofit.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That is fabulous, and that is something, it would make a great focus show. We did just earlier before session, I hosted a sustainability panel discussion with people from Yukon, people locally, people from Eastern about sustainability and, what it means and that sort of thing. But having an analysis like this would have been a nice addition. I should have thought of it, but we could do
next
our own.
time.
Yeah, this is great. The other thing is Phoebe also is a full professor at Yukon and environmental sociology. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a full professor in residence, just so nobody gets any she's a little different. I'm non-tenure track, but full-time. So, but I have been promoted up to the highest I can go in the position that I'm in. And I teach, as you just said, courses on environmental sociology, which in a nutshell is the social reasons for, in our case, our environmental destruction. In other societies' cases, it could be the social reasons for their environmental sustainability. If you wanted to look at more indigenous cultures, or cultures that our culture would say, oh, that they have not progressed, or they are still very primitive, but actually those cultures live much more sustainably, and their societies have very different value systems. And so one of my jobs in environmental sociology is helping students understand that societies are created by values and putting those values into practice. And in our culture, we have come to value profit, and we've come to value material goods for some and less for others. And a lot of this comes at the expense of environmental destruction, and of course, the sort of the long version is climate change, right? If we really want to articulate, what causes climate change, we would have to say, well, deforestation and pollution and carbon, and then you go, okay, yeah, but why do we do that? And then you say, well, because we want stuff. Yeah, but why do we want stuff? Why do we want a plastic duck and not the Amazon rainforest, right? And then you start to kind of really dig into how much in our culture we've come to prioritize the things that we make over the things that occur in the natural world.
Mm-hmm. And of course, things have gotten away. When you take a look at how we've developed the economy, a lot of the analysis was well, how do we stay warm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go from one place to the next? Oh, this is so convenient. Now we can drive from one town to the next, or one state to the next. And then all of a sudden, boom, here we are. We've developed all this stuff without looking at the consequences, and we're now, I think, we're looking at the consequences, and maybe they're becoming inculcated, but I think it's going to take time to understand why we did these things. And now there's a lot of interest that's risen to the monopolistic top, or, so that it's...
Convenience, again, is socially defined, right? In many ways, public transportation is much more convenient than owning your own car, trying to get insurance, finding parking,
right,
buying, if you could just leave your house, walk a block, and get a bus, that's affordable, and then you don't have to, deal with it. You leave the bus alone. The public transportation in Europe is highly convenient.
Yes.
So when we use that word, we always have to say, well, how are we defining that convenience, and why are we defining it as, the need of the individual to be able to have transportation in their own vehicle in their own time versus the collective public sphere. So
it just developed that way, and I have a theory, and it probably doesn't hold true with the indigenous societies that preceded the the Europeans who came here to our continent, but that it seems to be that the countries that are more developed in terms of wanting things, getting things, and whatnot, tend to be tend to be cold, and have winters and stuff like that. And it's just, I don't know. That's a certain type of was that geopolitics? I don't know what you call it, but you would know better than I would. But it seems to me to be the case.
Yeah,
and that's more southerly places closer to the equator that are more warmer and more seasonable for human beings tend to have less of a need for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, but
historically,
we could say the Inuit have managed to live in some of the coldest places.
Yeah. There are exceptions, but I don't know.
No, there's definitely the
a relationship,
northern relationships, or northern countries or northern states.
Yeah.
But again, if you compare the U.S. to Europe in terms of like we were saying, public transportation, it can't be matched, right?
Yeah.
And both have cold areas, and a lot of that had to do with the oil companies and the way that they.
Sure.
limited the investment or the federal investment in public transportation in our country versus in other countries.
Yeah, I think our country is too big.
And these are the sort of conversations, though, that I have my students look at. Sort of asking questions about.
Fascinated by all this.
Why has our country gone this way and another country gone that way?
That's that's a good one. You could open that up and talk a little bit about the election this year. But I'm not going to do that.
We're not going to do that.
I'm
We're
not
going to
do
talk
that.
about Phoebe's art.
Yeah. We're going to talk about art.
Phoebe's art. So why don't we? This is a great conversation, and there's so many other things we could say about environmental sociology, which I think is just a fabulous way to look at our society.
Well, and my art is based off my environmental sociology.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to get into some.
So let's talk about your what it's called, and we'll show a picture of the poster. It's from Ideas to Art and Exploration, and here's a picture of the poster that will. And when is this coming on?
So it opens April 2nd. It's at the Cary Gallery on Main Street.
861.
861 Main Street.
Yep.
And the reception is April 4th, 5 to 7. I will be there at the reception. I won't be there most of the rest of the time.
Right.
But if somebody wanted to meet me, I'd be happy to, show up or,
make an appointment.
Make an appointment. And, part of my painting has been to keep myself balanced. I started painting in graduate school because when you're in graduate school, as I'm sure you both remember, it's so mentally draining and so much reading, and I needed to explore my right brain, and I needed to do things that weren't as detail oriented, or at least not in a different way, right? And using my metaphoric mind and playing with ideas and using imagery rather than language.
Well, you weren't under any pressure.
Yeah, and I chose to do it. Actually, I also went to the Art Student League in New York City, which is a very famous art. It's an art school based on the French Academy structure, so that you follow a particular painter. And in a class, you could have somebody who's been painting for 30 years and somebody who's just beginning. And it's got 5 stories. They own an entire building on 59th Street, right off below Central Park. And I went there for years and years and did life drawing and anatomy painting, and that's really where I learned oil painting. And once I got my first tenure track position in Laredo, Texas, I lost the ability to have models, although I could have paid people, but I started to make copies of famous paintings throughout history, particularly from the Renaissance, and that gave me, a still picture, and then I distorted them to bring a modern spin on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell us about which one would you like to bring first?
So we could hold up, this is called We Never Fell, and it's a picture of Eve. So this, a former boyfriend of mine who was an artist at the time or is an artist, he encouraged me to start painting. When he saw this, he said, that's Da Vinci's Annunciation hand, and it is. It's
really?
A copy. Leonardo da Vinci has a very famous painting of the Annunciation when the angel points to Mary and says, you are going to bear, the child who So I copied Da Vinci's hand to be Eve, or the Annunciation of the angel, and the idea is that Eve is not going to eat the apple. And Eve is pointing at the snake saying, I know what you're up to. And this is inspired by indigenous cultures which do not have a concept of the fall. And when Christian missionaries were trying to proselytize and bring the idea of salvation, it didn't make any sense, because why would you be saved if you are not sinful? If Creator has already given you buffalo and the 3 sisters, or you live on a beautiful island in the Pacific and you have fish and coconut, the idea that, what do you mean we're sinful? How are we sinful? But I think the idea of original sin and the fall have contributed to our culture's destruction of the planet, because I think matter was seen as evil and only spirit was good. And again, that separation, when we think of Western culture as being dualistic between good and evil, and mind and spirit, and male and female, and black and white, and you manage to put all the good in one area and all the bad in the other. And so we have that sort of bifurcation that then creates this problematic experience. Go ahead.
When I saw that, it made me think of Emerson. Okay. Because I thought it wasn't Emerson's philosophy for a while. It was transcendentalism. That America was the new Eden. That it was that there was never a fall, and America was the new Eden. And maybe in his time, which was the middle of the 19th century and earlier, him and the other transcendentalists, most of whom I think were, maybe Emily Dickinson was one. Yeah. Maybe later on. Mm-hmm. Things looked, possibilities were great. We had and we reached turning point when we hit the Industrial Revolution, and that's really where it started to go downhill in terms of, the kinds of things that we're concerned about in terms of the environment, and I'm just, these kinds of things are fun to talk about.
Yeah, and I think part of the New Eden was, and this is interesting, a lot of the settlers had this idea that the Native Americans didn't do anything.
Right.
But they did a lot. They just did it in a manner that was sustainable.
Yeah, they moved around.
They planted, they cut some trees. It wasn't that they just floated on. But their impact was nothing compared to the impact that had been seen in Europe.
They didn't pile up a bunch of consumer goods.
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea of if we never fell, would we use Roundup? Like if you were still in paradise, would you pour poison on your lawn?
Oh yeah.
Probably not. Probably not, right? If you had that idea, I show my students a wonderful movie called Ancient Futures, which is about the Ladakh who live up in the Himalayas, and in their culture, polluting the water was their ultimate sin. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like, that to me I can get behind, right? The sins of sloth and gluttony, or the sin of you name them, all of the sexual sins. It's like, if you hurt somebody, sure, but if you're not hurting anybody, why is that seen as sinful? We spend so much time in this country worrying about, whether people are gay or not, whether people are challenging gender. It's like, who cares?
Right.
Exactly.
Look at what we're doing to the planet.
It's a distraction, I think, away from the things that we need to do. I mean, when you look at what someone's doing personally, as long as they're not doing anything violent, against somebody, or that is really none of anybody's business. And I don't understand at all why anybody would care, as long as they're not hurting people. And we seem to give a pass to those who are doing violent things in some ways. And it's very scary to me to think we're not focusing on what kind of brain is it that does violence, and not really fully getting what it is, in terms of psychology, neurology. Those kinds of things are things that maybe they get from being traumatized, and it gets passed from one generation to the next from the trauma, and their neurological structure is such that it continues to be even more so than maybe it would be in another person. But all these things haven't really been fully analyzed. That's where we need to put our focus. What causes the violence?
And somebody, I don't know who said it, children in America are exposed to thousands of images of violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet we don't allow them to see any sex. Like, any kind of, even consensual, loving. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's, but they can see things get blown up. They can see, Tom kill Jerry, they can see.
Or a lot worse probably in those games that they play.
Well, just even worse.
I can't say I know anything about that.
Think
I know.
As someone who looks at the issues in the school systems, and to think that every single child for the last 20 years or so has worried about whether there's going to be a school shooting. Mm-hmm. I mean, that that's the kind of trauma that they grow up
Yeah.
with, and they have no idea of how to really stop an AR-15 in a classroom.
Yeah, so we ban nudity, but we don't ban guns.
And by the way, all these things have to do with science, nudity, the reproductive process, that whole thing is science. It is. But this, not understanding violence, I don't understand why we're not focused on that, and why we want to keep it a secret from people what their reproduction, what their bodies are about. I mean, the science is really what it should be about, and how people just choose their whoever they're with is really, that's something that's socialization. We don't have to focus on that, but we do have to focus, I think, on the science of it, and let's not keep it a secret from kids.
Absolutely. So,
well, it's things have changed so fast because of technology, and it's there was a book called Future Shock. I didn't read it, but I read about it. Alvin Toffler.
Oh, I got it.
And when I read summaries of it, I said, that guy's right. I said, things are moving too fast for human beings. We just can't handle it.
Yeah.
And so you have people still alive that grew up in a time when and their parents. I mean, my parents were born in, around not long after the turn of the last century.
Yeah.
And their parents, I mean, it could go back pretty far when, violence was, at least in America, and probably, and it's certainly in Europe, was pretty commonplace. And it was, it was just naturally accepted probably. And, it's just all kinds of things that are accumulating. I mean, you talk to your grandchildren these days and, wow. I mean, the differences between our generation and theirs are, amazing. It's hard to keep up.
Very hard.
And that's things are being thrown at us really fast. So, that accounts for a lot of the problems we have.
Yeah.
Just to throw that into
Absolutely.
this discussion, which could probably go on all night if we really get out of control. And I'm certainly capable of doing that. So I'm trying to control myself.
Yes.
So we're going to wind down, and we're going to have a message from our sponsors.
Already?
This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with our very special guest, Phoebe Godfrey, who has a great exhibit over at the Carey Court Gallery. And we're here with Dennis O'Brien, my co-host, and we will be right back after these messages.
Hey, Dennis O'Brien back on Let's Talk About It with co-host Susan Johnson, Matt Rupar, our producer, and most important of all, Phoebe Godfrey, our special guest from UConn, has been at UConn for a long time as a professor of sociology. And she also, I think, still resides in Willimantic.
Yes,
which is great. She still loves this town, and
love this town.
She helped contribute in a big way something to this town. Another great thing that we have in this town, that would be the kitchen. Click, CLICK, which is the cooperative, commercially licensed cooperative kitchen.
Excellent.
Click. Okay. Well, I didn't get it quite right.
That's
so.
Okay.
I probably did better than Joe Biden or Mr. Trump, and
stop.
And I'm older than Trump. Anyway, Phoebe is here because she's an artist, along with all the many great things she does, and she is having a reception at the Carey Gallery on Main Street, 861 Main Street, and it runs from April 2nd through May 31st, 2024.
April 4th.
There is an opening reception on April 4th, Thursday, April 4th, from 5 to 7 p.m. Phoebe will be there, and she will be available at other times, depending on her schedule and depending on whether people, contact her and make an appointment.
Yeah.
So, Phoebe, great to have you on the show. And
Thank you.
I was surprised. You do so many other great things. I was surprised to hear about your art. And Phoebe has been involved in art for a long time.
Absolutely. Over probably my whole life. My mother was a occupational therapist trained in England, and in England, occupational therapy is a little different than here. It's a lot of it is using art to help people deal with their situation. So she used to do art with people. In the 50s, we had insane asylums where people would be locked up, and she would go and teach people to knit and paint, and so she just sort of transitioned that to her children, and so we did art my whole life.
That's fabulous.
It just was a natural fit. But like I was saying earlier, it wasn't until I went to graduate school that I was desperate to have that outlet, as well as the sort of left brain writing and analyzing, and so I still paint. I rent a studio over at 31 Moulton Court, and have participated in the open studios that happen around Thanksgiving, and we actually have a little gallery over there. We will be having a show there on mental health. We had one last year called Trigger Warning, and that show will open May 17th. There'll be an open mic on May 18th, and Sunday, May 19th, there'll be some kind of workshop. So if people are interested in that, they can check out the Moulton Court Facebook page. The gallery is called Molten Lava Gallery, and I personally don't have pieces in that show, but we have 17 artists all exploring aspects of mental health and other forms of kind of healing and processing, and it should be a great show. So.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is really important for people to understand, is that how the arts, dancing, music, those kinds of things actually are healing aspects for people who suffer trauma, for people who have addictions.
Yeah, for all of us.
All of those things are great ways to do that. And it's one of the things I've been focusing on as part of the work I've been doing at the Capitol, and also with other legislators nationally on mental health issues. So maybe I'll try and get to your event. It would
Absolutely.
be great. It'd be
Yeah.
wonderful to go to. But I just want to have our listening audience and the people who will see this visually, show them another one of your pieces
This is
of
the
artwork.
same one that's on the poster, bigger version, or
Here, let me hold the poster.
darker version. So that's
Okay.
And this one is also based on the story in Genesis. This is called Adam Swipes Out the Animals. And in the story of Genesis, it was Adam who got to name the animals. But as maybe your listeners know, we're undergoing the 6th great extinction. Species are going extinct at an alarming rate from habitat loss, from climate change, from pollution, but mainly habitat loss. And so I wanted to look at this notion of species extinction, and that we are swiping the animals out in both literally and metaphorically, because we're so busy entertaining ourselves with our toys, right? And and you could watch a million TikTok videos of cats, but the actual cats, the wild cats, are in great danger, and so it's just kind of how much we are not paying attention.
Yes.
And what does that mean? And why do we find our little toys more fascinating than this incredible diversity of life on this planet? We're like, oh well, who needs polar bear? Who needs another bluebird? Can't we just have pigeons? Isn't having rats enough? And I've started actually teaching a new course on human and animals, and it's called Human Societies and the Living Earth, and it gets students to look at different societal relationships with animals. We start with religions and views of animals and religions. We look at medicine. We look at animals and clothing, right? For everything from wool to leather to and plants and fungi and trees. So it's a very grounding class. Students really enjoy it. We read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is a beautiful book if people haven't read it. Kimmerer is a botanist trained in the academy, but also of indigenous background, and she brings together the two different cultures and looks at why, if I know the biology and the cell structure of this plant, but I don't understand this plant as a spiritual being, as medicine, and she has this wonderful term called the grammar of animacy, being able to see the living world as alive.
Well, you really raise a really fascinating thing to me because of the fungi that connects our trees and how the trees communicate with each other.
Yes.
And it's just amazing, and how if a tree gets in trouble, the other trees that are connected with the roots and the fungi all work together to try and save their tree friend. And it's just kind of...
Did you read the book by the German forestry man, Peter Wohl? I can't think of it. People can Google it. It's called The Hidden Lives of Trees.
Yes, well, I'm totally fascinated with plant structures and those kinds of things, and how they communicate, and how we've rejected certain plants, and how we, are not understanding the value of plants. I mean, during World War II, for example, dandelions were used as food.
Of course.
And, people had that because they didn't have access. But just think of how places that, just think the dandelions would be such a great thing in so many places.
There's so many food items that grow in your garden that are considered weeds. Purslane.
Correct.
Dandelion.
Yes.
Violets. Echinacea used for tea.
Yes.
You could just go on and on. Most young people can't identify a single plant.
Right.
And that's too bad. And that's one of the things I love about the fact that we have a little garden here in town, and Grow Wyndham, they actually do some plants, and I think it's really important to include that. And so, because I think that we miss out on a lot. My family come a long line of farmers, right? So I really had the great opportunity at least to see it in action. So I just think that the ability of people who farm is just phenomenal, because they can do just about anything.
Yeah, and we're so lucky in this area to have so many small farms, and again, going back to Click, of helping those small farmers, keeping our local dollars in our economy. That whole thing, buy local. I mean, it does make a difference if you buy from a local farmer versus you're buying carrots that were shipped in from South America, and yes, they're $1 cheaper. And if you can't afford the more expensive, but if you can, that's a great place to put your money.
And as we move forward with things like what you're doing, hopefully we can look at the how we subsidize food, because the subsidies for the foods that are not healthy and not fresh are nowhere near what the subsidies are for the processed, unhealthy foods. And you can see it in the actual health of people who are subjected to having to have that sort of food.
Yeah. No, so, that goes back to, why are we subsidizing food that's sort of not good for you? Why are we not, subsidizing the organic? Why are we not investing in public, and you start to go, well, wait a minute, in many cases do we do the opposite of what would benefit the collective, right?
Yeah, that would benefit the society, the people, their health. It also benefit, our stability. One of the things I learned when I first got to the Capitol is that the state of Connecticut only has about 3 days of food here. And if there's a supply chain problem, and we know now that these things can happen, then we're stuck with just a 3-day supply of food here in Connecticut. So making sure our farms are functional, that we subsidize our farms, that they work, these are the things that really are very, very important for people here in the state of Connecticut. And that's why another reason why Click is so valuable and important.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I had the privilege to go to Kenya back in February with UConn. I'm hopefully going back in August with students for a study abroad. And I went to a school in the rural area, and we were asking the kids, they were middle school kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do? And they're like, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an astronaut. And I asked, I was like, none of you want to be a farmer? And most of their parents are farmers, and it was most people in Kenya are farmers, but it was just like, oh no, we've brought, not only have we colonized them and done this and done that, and it's like, we've infected the kids further with the idea that no, why would you want to be a farmer, right? And same thing in our culture, right? Grow Wyndham is like such a breath of fresh air of like young people have an opportunity to, wait a minute, maybe I do want to work on the land. Maybe that isn't, the worst career choice I could make and something that people would kind of scorn at, right? Because we don't even uphold that as an option for young people.
Well, I think that farming cooperatives, so you have a little bit of diversity in your economic, plan, especially making a transition to maybe having more cooperative farms. I think that would be where everybody owns it, everybody works on it, everybody has it. I think that's the way that we can make the transition. I would suspect, and of course, one of the things that I have always thought hopefully will happen soon is the fact that Click will be able to start supplying not just like the schools. They do it in the north central part of New York State, and they do supply for the university systems, and it would be great for us to be able to have that opportunity here before the properties are gobbled up.
Yeah, the model that we looked at in Greenfield, Massachusetts is they are a commercial kitchen, and they buy from farmers, they process carrots, and they sell them to Smith or Mount Holyoke, and that kitchen has been there nearly 30 years.
Uh-huh.
So Click is doing well at having opened in 2015. So now it's we're coming up to 10-year anniversary. In another 10 years, my hope is that Click will continue to grow and the need will be seen as more and more, right? As you said, when we look at the big picture of our supply chains and what amount of food does an area have if you don't have 16-wheelers bringing it in to Stop and Shop every day? What's your alternative, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's also, I think, one of the other aspects of this that we've missed out on in the last 20 years, maybe more, is the sense of community that it brings.
Absolutely.
Because it does have that sense of community. This is here. These things were grown here. People love to go to, the co-op and know that this came from Click, or that Click has helped with another business on Main Street. So it has that sense of community that we can bring back to our state, to our local places, because that is really that is how it all works, by having everybody together. And having us into these little silos doesn't really help our sense of community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think the answer to all of these questions is education. I think that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing with your art. That's what you're doing at school. And people who are educating are competing with a lot of different sources of competition, and television is a big one.
Yeah,
and
or
the internet is a bigger one.
The internet is a bigger one.
And so when people have asked me to get involved, and my issue is education. I try to spend as much time as I can advocating for changes in education that will make education much more available to everybody. And I think kids should start school at age 3. I think it should be mandatory. I don't think that I was a judge in the children's court, and I saw kids that weren't going to preschool even though there were openings because they want grandma or somebody wanted the kid at home. And you start school way behind everybody else, and if you're way behind, you might develop a bad attitude about school. Yeah. And there's all kinds of issues, but we need to we need to make public education our highest priority. I really think so. I think, and we're up against awfully tough competition, and it is tough. I mean, I look at the CERC reports that are on each community in the area and in the state. They have them on the internet, and they'll tell you how many people in a given town are high school graduates, how many people are college graduates, and the figures you may have seen them are stunningly low, and they're getting lower. And it's not good, and because you're talking about all these issues, and we're getting rid of certain species of plants and animals and whatnot without even knowing what we're doing.
Yeah,
and that's dangerous. We're in serious danger. Period.
We are in serious danger.
We're in serious danger. I don't want to be fatalistic about it, but it's. We're at a crossroads here, and this is, and to me, the only, education is the antidote to ignorance, And I think that, that is what we need to do.
One of my favorite bumper stickers is coexist or co-extinct.
Yes.
I think it's pretty clear.
Well, when you were talking about species, I remember reading about, I couldn't believe it, about the passenger pigeon.
Yeah.
And how the passenger pigeons were once everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it didn't take very long in the 19th century or early 20th century, and they were gone.
Yeah.
Because they were used, they used for food and other things.
Yeah.
But it was amazing because the skies were filled with them, according to what I've read. And if that could happen to them, it could happen to any species. And they're this is a species that you would say, there they are.
In our lifetime, just look at insects. When
right.
when we were all kids, our cars would be covered with bugs in the summer, right? Your windscreen would have been plastered with dead bugs, and your lights, and now it's like you see a bug and you're like.
Right.
It's like you just killed the last one,
Kids will do that to you. They'll say, "Oh, great! Hey, there's a bug there. Kill it, Grandpa." And I say, "Whoa, how do
I always stick them outside.
Sue says, "Catch it, put it outside."
That's what I do.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to just go through this once more and just let everybody know, Phoebe Godfrey.
Yes.
Talk about your exhibit that's going on at the Carrie Quirk Gallery starting April 2nd. But Phoebe will be there for opening night on the 4th of April, beginning at 5, between 5 and 7, and that's a Thursday. And so I hope everybody can make it down and take a look at that. And it's going to be a great event, and there are so many things that we can learn from Phoebe's explorations on the environment.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And there are a lot of other themes, paintings there, and some of them I did maybe 10 years ago. So it's been a journey. That's why it's an exploration. It's kind of a retrospective of art that I've done. With the most recent one I just did using metal. So not just painting, metal, sculpture, different kinds of mediums. So hopefully I'll see you two there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Be there,
In any event, also this show will show on Charter Spectrum TV at 8 p.m. on a Friday evening, probably in 2 or 3 weeks. And we can put it on the internet. It'll be on...
we'll put it on next week. It'll go on to YouTube right away. And then I'll be e-blasting it. And I know that we can have Phoebe Godfrey also get a copy of the show. And she can blast it where she is.
That's right. That's right. Put it on whatever website you have access to. I'm sure you have access to a lot of them because you're all over the place.
Well,
anyway, Phoebe Godfrey, so glad to have you on the show again. And looking forward to your exhibit, looking forward to getting over to the Carrie Quirk Gallery, which is a great place to visit. 861 Main Street, folks, starts April 2nd, goes all the way to May 31st.
But
Susan
do the opening reception on the 4th between 5 and 7.
Okay, we're running out of time. We'll be back next week with another terrific guest. Thanks for listening, folks.